Welcome back to DCS World. A couple of months ago, I was flying an Operation Epsom campaign mission, mission number 2, I believe, and during that mission I had what can only be described as a catastrophic engine failure. I lost the engine shortly after takeoff, about 10 minutes. I was just circling to altitude. In the mission I had to wait for a timing, and I was just waiting for that timing. I wasn't pushing the engine hard like in a dogfight or anything. In fact, the settings were quite low. I was about 2,300, 2,400 RPM and less than 0 boost. And during that, I had an engine failure. The engine completely died on me, and I had to do a dead stick landing and repair the aircraft before the engine could work. I had plenty of fuel, and the engine just shouldn't have died in that situation. After some research, I found out in the forums that essentially the cooling model of the Spitfire Mark IX in DCS used the same code as for the Mustang and the P-47. However, there is a fundamental difference into how the cooling of these aircraft work. Essentially, if the engine in the Spitfire, or the engine oil in the Spitfire, is too cold, a thermostatic valve to the radiator closes, and that cold oil no longer goes to the radiator to be cooled even further, so it stays near the engine and heats up until it gets to a point that it needs to cool off. The thermostatic valve opens, that hotter oil goes through the radiator, cools down, and if it cools down too much because you're not running the engine hot, then it will close again, and that cycle will continue. Obviously, if you're pushing the engine harder, then that thermostatic valve is going to remain open, but for cruise settings, or at least economical cruise settings, that valve will probably remain mostly shut, as just the air passing the aircraft at any kind of altitude and low power settings is enough to cool the engine down. So I noticed in the most recent update, as of the other day, the patch notes will be on screen now, that the cooling model for the Spitfire has been updated. And that's what we're going to do today. We're going to start the aircraft, we're going to take off, and I'm just going to fly around and probably burn off a tank of fuel at low power settings. I'll probably climb, see how high I can climb without the boost going above 0, and keeping the RPM at around 2,400. When I get to a reasonable altitude, I'll probably drop that even further, and maybe -2 boost and 2,000 RPM. And I'm really going to try hard to see if that engine will seize again, and to see if this cooling model has been accurately updated as it's supposed to have. So let's get the aircraft started up. I notice I had my controls configured in the wrong place for startup. That shouldn't be a problem. That's the engine start up. I just started up the cold start instant action mission, so I have no idea where I am. Okay, I'm at Detling. There's no runway here, so I'll just fly somewhere that, or taxi somewhere that looks like it can be taken off from. Already the engine seems a little bit cranky. So obviously the theory behind running, or the engine having an issue while it's being ran too cold is simply that oil becomes more, or rather less viscous with temperature. The hotter you heat the oil up, the more like water it becomes. So by running in the air and not running the engine particularly hot, the idea being the engine will become too thick to fully lubricate the whole engine, and eventually the engine will seize because effectively it is not getting the oil, the lubrication that it requires. So by recoding it and allowing the engine to stay warm, then the code should keep the engine well lubricated. The engine temperature shouldn't drop too low either. It should stay relatively warm. And I'm not sure if this is where one of the runways is. I'll quickly just have a look. Don't think there's any wind in this mission. So I can probably just go. Already the engine definitely sounds a bit different. Speed's alive. 60 knots, take it off the tail. And the engine's died. Okay, so that's definitely different. The prop's definitely not been hit on when I pulled it forward. The engine just died. See if I can get it to start up again. Okay, so fuel pump's on. Carb should have been forward. Props forward. Mixture lever back. Magnetos are on. Okay, the engine's not turning over at all. Okay, so I'm going to grab a new aircraft and hopefully we'll let that aircraft warm up. And once we've let the aircraft warm up, then we'll try and take off. Maybe I just tried taking off too soon. Okay, so here we are in our second aircraft. I've let it run for a short while, so the engine should definitely be a little bit warmer this time. And we're going to see if that makes a difference. Also, while I was waiting for the aircraft to warm up, I had a better look at this airfield in the F2 view, and there's definitely a marked landing strip here that I didn't see before. So we'll definitely use that this time. I'm not particularly familiar with this airfield or this map either. We're on the channel map. And I haven't flown any campaigns on here yet, so yeah, not very familiar with the majority of these airfields. I've done a bit of training on here, but mostly flown from Manston. Also taxiing to the other end of this This airfield will give the engine a little bit more time to warm up as well, so we've got no excuses next time. And it's already sounding a little bit better as well. I see the windsock for the end of the runway. The runway should be over here somewhere. At least according to the F2 view I saw earlier. We'll have another look. Oh yeah, we missed it a little bit. Definitely not very well marked. And that's close enough. Definitely sounds better on the power. We're live much quicker this time. 100 knots. Half an hour run. And we're up. Landing gear up. And it's up, so let's drop this boost. Drop the RPM. Low boost. Low RPM. Trimmer out. And I am just gonna cruise around the map for however long it takes for this engine to either die on me or to run out of fuel. We've just hit 10,000 feet now, and as you can see the engine's still going. I've allowed the boost to drop off as air pressure's dropped off. I've not been continuously topping the boost up to keep it at 0 boost, because I figured if I let it drop, it's going to be running the engine less hard. So if there is this problem that we saw in the past, it's going to amplify it by not continuously increasing the boost and put more pressure on the engine. So I'm pretty glad to say that it's not had a catastrophic failure yet. I'm going to run it a little bit longer and see what happens, but to be honest, I've been running it for between 10 and 15 minutes now, and the engine's still going, so that's longer than what we had before, at lower pressures and RPM than we had before. So I'm fairly confident this issue with the Spitfire itself has been fixed, and I hope to use it in future missions to allow me to fuel save and not have issues like I had in one of my previous missions where we just did a slightly longer patrol than normal and instantly ran into massive fuel issues because I was too afraid to run the engine really lean and without any power to get the most economic cruise out of it as possible, because I just felt the engine was just going to give up on me again and ruin the entire mission. So because of that, it led me to having fuel issues in that particular mission. So hopefully future missions and campaigns that I do with this aircraft will no longer have that problem. I've heard some of the campaigns from reflected simulations have some really long transits in that really do require that fuel saving and the engine to be run at those really low settings for a really long time. So hopefully it'll allow that campaign, or those campaigns rather, to be played relatively easily without worry of losing the engine. And that's pretty much it from me. I'm going to continue flying around, but if you don't see anything to the video after this, then you can safely assume that there were no issues in the rest of the flight, and from now on the Spitfire engine can be ran at a very low boost and RPM settings without having to worry about it. Thanks for watching.